So today we have an awesome guest called Justin Mason, who is going to share with us his story and his passion, which is all about food security and growing your own food and veg, organic fruit and veg, to be able to kind of live sustainable lives. And I think it's very timely that we're having this conversation. I think in the last 12 months, a lot of people have been home and had the opportunity to make use of their gardens in new and interesting ways. And I have personally been to see Justin's setup, and it's absolutely mind-blowing and very inspiring. So welcome, Justin, today to the Inspiring Humans podcast. I will just give a little short bio, and then I'll let you kind of share a more in-depth story and background and what led you to this as a passion. So Justin is the founder and director of his company, Agri Aquaponics, and he has a passion to use unproductive space and grow food in a water-wise fashion. And Justin, I know you've had like a history in a great story and upbringing that has led you to this path of, your passion in making use of space and being able to, empower others to be self-sufficient. Others on their own properties, but also restaurants and cafes and things like that, which I know you have in your site. So welcome to the podcast, and I'd love to hear a bit about what led you to this passion.
Thanks, Steph. Thank you very much. I think at the age of just turned 46 yesterday, so I'm just getting to a point where I'm driving is something which is my passion. I think from zero to now is putting the building blocks in place to get to here. I still have a real job, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And that actually did inspire a lot of what I'm doing now. But originally, agriculture has always been in my veins. Not from a farming background. Grew up in Melbourne, in the city, Baldwin, so in a suburbs of Melbourne. But as a child, I was found on the garage roof propagating seeds. In winter, I found a packet of seeds and some seed raising mix, and I had these trays on the garage. And the garage was because it created this heat up there. This is in Melbourne in winter, and it was. I found it quite fascinating that I could actually have something to eat from a seed in sort of 3 months duration. So I was growing and planting as a kid and then as a teenager, I was fortunate enough, our parents bought a block of land as a hobby farm, which enabled us to sort of explore that passion even further. So we're working on the land every sort of weekend, every school holiday. We sort of converted an old 20 acre block of really a disused apple farm into a very productive vineyard, actually, after about 5 or 6 years. And that involved us all labouring away. Dad's English, Mum's Australian, and good old English father. You can do everything yourself. Just put your mind to it. And that was I was fortunate looking back. It really grounded us as children. 3 boys. I'm the oldest. My middle brother is a vet. And that all, I think, inspired from that block of land, giving him that opportunity to be there every weekend and do things. And actually, we did have horses just to keep the grass down more than anything. And then I ended up getting through up to year 12, and then got to the end of year 12 and thought, okay, I want to get into ag, but I also wanted to get into commerce. Dad was in banking, and I could see how lucrative that was. And I was torn between like an ag science degree and a commerce degree, and Melbourne Uni had both. And then I found this course up in Orange in New South Wales. We did agricultural commerce. So it's a blended course of both things that I really loved. So I turned 18, and suddenly by 9 o'clock in the morning, I was at Vic Roads, got my license, and by 11 o'clock, I was on the road to Orange with a car full of suitcases to go and start university. And I did 3 years up there, got my degree, and it was the best thing I ever did. Best decision I ever made. And it was a tough decision, because back then, I had local universities, and I got into a lot of those, but I was fortunate that my family opened up all the doors and said, you can go anywhere, do whatever you want. So I said, I can go to Orange? Said, yeah, go to Orange. I said, wow. And it was brilliant. So that was sort of a big seed into fueling this passion for agriculture and using the land to be productive, and also built a huge network of friends dotted all throughout New South Wales and Queensland. So fast forward 25 years after Orange, I was in London for 6 or 7 years, in banking, Brisbane, running my own business for about 10 years, in Canada, running my own business for about 5 years, and now I'm home in Melbourne. I left Melbourne when I was 21 and I returned when I was 42. So half my life was out of Melbourne, and gosh, I'm enjoying being back. That's for certain. Back to family, back to close to where my brother is, his farm, and mum and dad. But I was working for a bank in the city in Collins Street, and I'm on the 25th floor. And I look down every day, and I shouldn't say look down, but I look out across all the landscape, and we're higher than most buildings. So I'm looking at a lot of rooftops. I'm thinking, you know, there's a lot of people in here having lunch and dinner every day. And there's food carted in and food in bags and crates, and that's great. But there's all this space on these roofs, and there's not even solar panels. There's a few solar panels on 1 or 2 roofs, but there's just, it's concrete, I call it dead space. And I thought, wouldn't it be, you know, the land is so expensive in Melbourne, and just property, land, just flat land on the ground level is it's so expensive. You have to produce food, you have to be hundreds of kilometers away. Then you've got transportation, you've got logistics, you've got, you know, it's not fresh. When was it harvested? What was it done? What was done to it beforehand, so you can get to market? And that's an economy in itself. And I'm not here to rattle that, but I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great to use these rooftops in a much more productive way and trying to build a system and design a system so we could grow food? And it's not going to be your potatoes and your pumpkins, but it'll be your delicates, the things that don't travel well. Definitely your leafy greens and your herbs, but staples like, you know, spinach and kale and all that type of lettuce. And we have really fresh food in the city. Then we have food growing in the city, be known for it. And Europe's a few steps in front of us in this respect. And so brain's going over, ticking away. And you wouldn't believe it, but I sat back at my desk, and the Windows screensaver comes up, and this is when the screensaver, then you click on it, and it was an image. And if you like the image, you click on the image, and it'll go to a website about that product, or normally it's a landscape. And I did that, and it went through to an aquaponics page. And I went, well, this is really interesting. So I couldn't spend too much time about it at work. So I copied the URL, sent it home, and I then looked into aquaponics. And aquaponics is virtually a method of growing food. It's actually it's a science which has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Chinese used it, the Aztecs used it. It's using fish as the source of nutrients for a production of a garden, or more of a rice paddy field for the Chinese, for argument's sake. So they had rice paddy fields, they had fish in those rice paddy fields, and that was producing the nutrients for those plants. So this is a closed loop system where you had fish in one area, and that water would circulate through the garden, and all you had to do is feed the fish, and you had all your nutrients required to grow plants and vegetables. And I found that fascinating. Everything I've done so far, I think, wow, that's brilliant. Okay, and then how can we then modulate that to a situation where we can use it in a productive manner? So aquaponics is not a new thing in the world right now. But on a commercial scale, it's really not there yet. But it's more, it's finesse and does really well on more of a micro scale than on a commercial scale. To do 5 acres of it, yes, they're doing it in Oman and in the Middle East and in Indonesia, but it's really for that sort of medium size production. So so moving on from that, like when I did travel a bit. So I mentioned I lived in Canada and traveling back to Australia, and another passion of mine, so it's agriculture and growing food, but really nutrition, global nutrition is a real bugbear of mine. And when I was coming back from Canada after living there for 5 years, I traveled back to Australia. I went via London, so that's not the most direct way, but I went via London to catch up with mates I hadn't seen for actually 15 years. And I realized that global nutrition was being deprived by highly manufactured foods. And it's not a realization, but I could physically see it. I could physically see, I was in a bit of a bubble in Canada there for a period. And I was going through London, the size of people, what they're eating, what they're putting in their mouth, they're just grabbing stuff and putting it in. And they weren't actually thinking about the nutrition. And there's a big disconnect, even the amount of water they're consuming. There's a big disconnect in everything. And then where there was relatively fresh food, particularly in London, Marks and Spencer's, everything's in plastic. And I was pulling my hair out, saying, well, how could we feed all these people? But I understand you have to manufacture the food, or have to use manufactured food because it lasts longer and it travels better. Okay, I understand that. But what if we could do microsystems so that everyone could have a microsystem? So just those basic greens were fresh. Those basic nutrients were coming into their bodies fresh and untouched and organic. I'm not sort of a big advocate. I'm not a vegan or vegetarian or big on the organic wagon, but naturally this product and this system it feeds that, and it is organic, and it's brilliant when you actually start then eating live food. Now we get into another world where actually we're snipping it and it's going into our bodies within an hour, not unrefrigerated. That's what live food is. It's unrefrigerated. It's fresh. So it's nutrition is a big player. Using an unproductive space, and then it's been water wise, and water wise, that sort of was hammered, came through to me during the last drought. You know, all my mates from Ag College, dotted from Melbourne all the way up to Gundawindi, all suffering from the big drought we just had a couple of years ago. And in the commentary from all of them was, oh, we got an inch of rain last month, but we didn't need it last month. We needed it a month before, or it comes in the wrong time, and when it comes, it just runs off. And it's capturing that water. When we get it, we're such a great, vast country, but when we get it, how do we capture it? So that's it's a bigger discussion altogether. But then in my mind, I'm thinking, whatever I do, I want to be water wise, and let's capture the water and recycle it. And that's what aquaponics does. So that sort of, so the three big passions there are as a nutrition, using unproductive space, and being water wise. And my aquaponics systems and hydroponic systems do benefit all those three parts. Bit of an introduction.
Amazing. And your passion is contagious, and you can feel how passionate you are about this topic. And thanks for explaining aquaponics, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of what aquaponics is, and hydroponics as well. So if you can just explain what hydroponics is, and then I've been lucky enough to see your setup in your backyard, but can you explain visually for people that haven't seen it before what it actually looks like?
Absolutely. Aquaponics and hydroponics are virtually similar processes. What it really is using captured recycled water, and you're recirculating that water. Aquaponics is using fish in a separate, say maybe a tank, and that water will go through the fish tank and pull through the nutrients into the garden. And aquaponics is using fish as the source of nutrients for the plants. That's the only difference. So I build and design systems that can be used either way, with fish, I say, or without fish. Make it very simple. With fish, aquaponics; without fish, hydroponics. Now, my hydroponics I call organic hydroponics, because unlike the big commercial farms, which are fine, and they have a purpose, they are really like a chemistry experiment. So they are balanced to the millimeter on pH and on all their nutrients. And if they're growing tomatoes, they only put these special nutrients in for the tomatoes. And if they're growing lettuce, they put these special nutrients in. But mine is very generic. So I've built systems for the retail market, for the residential market. So therefore, it's just using one ingredient, and that's power feed, which is a organic seaweed extract, which comes from, you get it from Bunnings, from any garden centre. It's sea salt's big brother. So you hear about sea salt, a seaweed fertilizer. Actually, sea salt is just a conditioner, has no fertilizer in it. But power feed has the nutrients which plants need. And I've built and maybe designed these systems, and I'll explain how they work. I've tried to keep it as simple. I have that engineering mindset, probably being on the land, building things, keeping it simple, so it's virtually bulletproof. And that is that I use grow buckets. So they are 1 meter by 700 millimeters in diameter by 300 millimeters deep. It's actually a pond. It's a quality food grade pond, and that's 200 liters can be held in there. So that becomes one of my garden beds. So one of my systems is 2 of those side by side. So the system would be 2 meters long by 700. And it'll be on a table trolley. So simply like a big steel table with wheels. And underneath that is a 400 litre tub, exactly the same. They're made from the same food grade polymers, and that would be a little bit longer and a little bit deeper. And so what happens is a pump is in the tub underneath. That's full of water, the one underneath, and the 2 grow beds are full of clay balls. And that's my secret, in the secret sauce. And that's really an aquaponic measure of way of producing food is definitely, they call it clay media balls, but they're aerated clay balls. They're round, they're smooth, and they're only about 10 mil, 1 centimeter in circumference. So the plants grow in the clay balls. They don't grow in soil. And the trick there is, what we're doing is we're constantly pumping water from the sump, so what I call ground central station underneath, into the grow beds. Constantly, that water is constantly flowing in. And what we have is a drain pipe, which is about 1 inch below the surface of those clay balls. So the water will get to the top of that drain pipe, so 1 inch below the surface, so the roots will get engaged with water, and then all the water will flow out through a bell siphon. So that's the bit of physics behind it. And that's automatic. So it doesn't need any, there's no mechanics behind that whatsoever. It just happens through physics. So it's a bit like a toilet. It constantly fills and then instantly dumps it all out. So it slowly fills and dumps it all out in one big hit back into that sump tank underneath. So that's the flow from the bottom in. So it's a 12 volt pump. So very low power usage. It's 20 watts. So it's a small light bulb, and that's running 24/7. That doesn't stop. And I've designed systems where that can be connected to a DC battery, which can be connected to a solar panel. So this thing can be sitting in the middle of a tennis court or in the middle of an old car park somewhere. And then they're modular, so they can be scaled up and scaled down. So that's the basic sort of principles behind. And the only difference would be is if you wanted fish, then you would add an additional tank, which would be a fish tank, which will be connected, and the water would circulate through the fish tank first and come back in, and that water be coming back into the sump tank, mixing that fish, the ammonia which the fish produce from their gills. So it's not actually fish waste, it's ammonia from their gills, comes back into the sump tank, and that ammonia gets converted into nitrates and nitrites, which the plants can absorb, and that's converted through the clay media balls, because there's bacteria in those clay media balls, organic bacteria. So it's very unique in the respect the design is all modulated, and I've really cut it back and made it nice and neat for the end consumer, because where I can see these trolleys, let's call it a trolley for argument's sake, 2 meter by 700 trolley on casters on wheels, so it is mobile. Suddenly we've got a mobile garden. Where's that good for? Well, patios. We've got small courtyards. If you're renting and you can't dig up the garden and plant big boxes and planter boxes in a rental, you can, when you finish your tenancy, you can leave and wheel this with you. So that's quite unique in that respect. So that's what I'm offering, right? That's what I'm trying to sell right now on my website, and I'm making different versions of that. And I obviously consult with the client first, understand what their needs are and requirements, and have a look at their space and come up with ideas around this basic principle.
Well, I can see you being extremely in demand very quickly, because I think, what person wouldn't want that set up in their backyard if they've got the space to have it? It's just, that feeling of being able to pick your own fruit and veg and eat. I know, at your house, you don't buy anything at the supermarket in terms of, you know, lettuce and fruit and veg, which is, what an incredible feeling. So just thanks. That was a tremendous explanation of the setup, and it you know, would be so valuable to have you come out and, you know, scan the space and kind of suggest and consult on what would be possible in you know, people's backyards and the space that they have. But for you know, I've got a lot of friends that are wanting to do this in their own backyards. How would you scale it back, and what would you advise people that are just kind of new to this? You know, few questions in here. What can they grow? What can they start with? And how can they make a start with, you know, baby steps towards growing something in their backyard?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's what I'm always thinking about. I'm always thinking about the end consumer. I'm thinking about what would someone who wants to passionate about what goes into their body, but really doesn't have an idea about gardening and growing vegetables and what to do about these pests and that pest. So that therefore my designs, I've made them very simple. So a simple grow bed, you know, which that's why I like the two grow bed is excellent, because you get, for 2 meters by 700, you can get some decent amount of vegetables in there. And you start with your lettuce, your leafy greens. They're easy. And you go to Bunnings and buy a punnet, or garden centre, buy a punnet of whatever vegetables you like, the leafy greens. When you start going to the fruiting vegetables, the tomatoes, the peppers, the capsicums, they need a little bit more. Obviously, they need the heat, so they're summer only, and they need a lot more nutrients as well. And you read the plant. So I'm not sort of being airy fairy about reading the tea leaves, but you do look at the leaves. That they tell you what they need. If the plant goes pale yellow and the veins get really yellow and it doesn't look right, doesn't have that deep rich green, well, we need a bit more nutrients in there. So we can test that through water test kits, and that is possible. But to keep it simple, what I recommend is, once we have a system up and running, turn it on, it just does its thing. We plant out a whole bunch of lettuce and some kale and bok choy and things like that, and we put 50 mils of power feed, which is 50 mils is not even a little palm worth of power feed every fortnight. So we go on a cycle. Let's go every fortnight. We'll drop 50 mils into the tub underneath. And that's it. And that it'll just do its own thing. But to start with, definitely those leafy greens. One of the biggest tricks, and a few of my clients have done this, and they planted plants and they're wilted and they haven't looked too good and they've died. And I haven't had anything die. I'm thinking, what has happened here? I'm thinking, testing the water. No, everything's fine. They planted with the soil on still. They actually took it out of the punnet from Bunnings, the bigger one, and whacked it right into the clay balls with all the soil attached. What's happened there is it's drowning, because it doesn't want any soil on the roots. The roots want to be in those clay balls, just the roots. So if you taking a punnet which has got seed raising mixture in soil, you break out all your bits of each lettuce and you soak it in water. You shake it in water in a big bucket and let all that soil come off, so you can see the whites of the roots. You want to see the roots, the actual color of the roots. And you plant, just move a few clay balls down, you can plant them. The best thing about the clay balls is no weeds. And because it's raised, very few pests. Snails don't get up there. So my productivity is massive. I've actually got growing also vegetables on the ground as well, in garden beds. My productivity on my grow beds is 10 times what's on the ground, because it's getting smacked with all the pests, more pests than up because it's waist height. So the grow beds are waist height, so everything is there at your waist, and the only thing it's getting in is caterpillars, and that's because the butterflies are laying eggs on the leaves. So you see white butterflies, just you get out there and check for caterpillars and you just pick them off. So it's old school sort of pest management, but you're keeping it very simple. And excuse me, there's obviously seasons, and I'll help that too. So I have charts of the months of the year of what to plant when. Particularly Melbourne, what works, in January, February, March, April, May, June, the winter veg versus the summer veg. But you have those leafy greens can go all year round. You can do kale and lettuce all year round. Bok choy, fantastic.
Amazing. I've got a few very specific questions that I know people have in their minds. What plants deter butterflies? Are there certain plants that you can buy that deter them?
Yeah, that's a good one. Butterflies. A big butterfly net. Uh,
I
no,
love butterflies, but
yeah,
they
it's
might.
the white ones. It's those white mothy looking ones. It's a white, anything with a white flower, like a white daisy. That's a good organic way of getting of deterring. It doesn't. It's not foolproof. It deters butterflies because it looks they're territorial, and so it looks like a butterfly. It's a white daisy. So in every one of my grow beds, I have yeah, maybe it's pansies. I'm not too sure, but I have one of those plants in there as well. It does. I believe are getting a lot less invasions into those beds than in other beds. And then I've speaking to people in Melbourne this summer. We've had a very cold summer as well. And another important part of my design and my kits is that I do supply covers for them as well. So each grow bed has a dome cover which covers it, and that's great for winter. And it's got a PVC cover and a mesh cover. So there's two covers that Velcro on and off. The mesh one's great for minimizing the butterflies, stopping them from getting in, and also protecting the veg from the harsh sun. Because even like the weather we had today, where it's 30, 32 degrees and the westerly sun's hitting your produce, everything goes a bit limp. So it doesn't really like that aggressive sun. Definitely loves a lot of morning sun. These are things you learn, and having the system on wheels, you can move it around, which is brilliant. You know, you can move, and I call one of my systems "Follow the Sun." And that's a bit from Xavier Rudd, but we'll just go from "Follow the Sun" because we can move it winter versus summer. One where I am now, everything's at one side of the house because that gets the best morning sun in the summer, but the other side of the house, it gets the best sun in winter. So I just wheel everything over there. And so everything of mine's, you don't have to have a mobile version, but I just find that for the extra, I think it's $100 for the casters and the quality casters, it adds, it gives you great versatility, and it brings it to another level where you can actually, if you're a tenant, you can move it. If you need to move it, your guests, move it out the way, barbecue, and move it back into the spot for when you're at home.
Amazing. I've got another couple specific questions, and then I want to ask you, the big vision. So, what about the fish in aquaponics? Are there specific fish that you use?
That's a good question. Absolutely. Native fish and silver perch and trout are the most popular. Silver perch are very hardy. They last about 3 years before they become what we call plate size, where you can consume them. Trout, on the other hand, they're hardy as well. They're fast growers, and they can be plate size in 18 months. So they grow twice as fast as silver perch. Very hungry fish, aggressive feeders. Down in Melbourne, it's a real balancing act because silver perch don't like cold water. So anything under sort of 10 degrees. And we had a few of those this winter. So you might lose one or two, and that's part of fish management. You always go for in one of our tanks. We'll probably start with 50, and we'll buy fingerlings, so they're about as big as your finger, and you might lose probably 20% of them over the first year because that's the most vulnerable period, the first year. But trout love the cold but don't like the heat. And today, I had one of my water monitors came back to me and said my fish tank was 26 degrees. And trout don't like anything more than sort of 22, 23 degrees. So I don't have trout. I've got currently silver perch. The silver perch are fine in this. So with the aquaponics, I definitely would get more involved in design, and that wouldn't be mobile. That would be more of a stationary unit. And I have, moving on from that, I have a big sort of commercial units going right now on farms here on the Mornington Peninsula, and they're really designed for putting in the back of restaurants on rooftops. When I say back of restaurants, in the car park or that area at the back where the dumpsters are, all I need is say something that's even 6 meters long by 2 meters wide. So they're narrow and long. And they're modular too, so I can go longer, or I can go multiple side by side, and that's my commercial product. So if a restaurateur or a cafe said, yes, I definitely want to have more control of my source, I want to grow this, and this, and I go through all this every week. I will then formulate a strategy and design for them, and we'll look at the layout and get planning approval. The beautiful thing about my systems is nothing penetrates the ground. Everything sits on the ground. So everything can be moved and removed later. So if the tenancy finishes or whatever. And like on a rooftop, for argument's sake, my systems are actually, the commercial systems are made out of scaffolding as the tower. So think about a scaffolding tower, which is 1,200 wide, and they're in 2.5 meter bays, and each bay holds 2 grow beds. And that's because it's designed so I could walk up a stairwell and get it up to the rooftop, and then erect it, and it's self-leveling. So it has all these great attributes, those scaffolding, and it's recyclable. So in respect, I'm using old scaffolding, which is recycled products. My grow beds are made out of IBC tubs for the commercial side of things, and that's again a recycled product which is transported maybe olive oil in the past or something like that, and I've cut and chopped and used those. So I try and use as many recyclable products as I can in my systems. So I do have a commercial offering, and I do have a retail offering. So completely different, but basically the science is the same about the water flow. And definitely the aquaponics, I definitely lean more on a larger system. And you could do it for a home system, but it'll be a larger system, and it'll be to feed the whole family.
Amazing. And, you know, there's so many people at the moment looking at how they can live off the grid. Can you speak a little bit to that for people that might not know what off the grid means? You know, many people do, but some people it's new to them. And just in with that question, I want to ask you as well, how do you utilize solar power in your setups?
Yeah, so good question. And I'm lucky that I've sourced really good quality pumps, and all the components I've sourced best I can get. And I use PodMax, that's the brand, that's for the tubs and the pumps. So I really have that one supplier, US company, and the pumps themselves, I have an option for a 12-volt pump. So that's just running off 12 volts. So that's a battery. So I use deep cycle batteries. So these are like caravan batteries, but again, very good quality from I went to the caravan camping show in Melbourne, and I found the supplier that way, and he supplies me everything with the solar panels, the batteries, the inverters, and everything like that. So it's a very neat little system. So the solar panels are connected directly to the battery, actually directly to the battery. That's keeping the battery topped up during the day, but remember the pump is running 24/7. So the battery will go down overnight, you know, slowly, and it can run for about 5 days without any solar input. So the batteries are decent batteries in that respect. And the solar just keeps that battery topped up. So that is completely off the grid. That could be sitting, I could have that be sitting on the Eastern Freeway in the middle, producing food. And that's when you put that in your head, with no other inputs other than fish food, I'm producing food. So it's quite unique.
That's incredible. And I think, you know, now is the time for us to start to think of how we can be free and sovereign and not rely on, you know, because we're seeing at the moment the middle, you know, the medium-sized businesses being wiped out and the large ones, you know, thriving with what's happening in the world at the moment. And it's so important for us to think as humans, as sovereign beings, how can we provide for ourselves, you know, so we're the least possible, you know, reliant on the system for our livelihoods. And I just think, Justin, what you're doing is so inspiring and so timely. I mean, it's always timely, but and what you mentioned before about, you know, why aren't we being educated about this? Why hasn't this been in our education systems? Why aren't we hearing more at the moment about how we build our immune systems, you know, with the current status quo? And it's very obvious, it's very clear. And, you know, we can have very strong immune systems that prevent us from becoming ill, you know, because we're so strong with what we put into our bodies. So I just think this is such a gift to be able to share this information with people so that they can begin to take the steps to create their own, or to reach out to people like you to support them to set up and utilize their space.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're so right, and it works. I'm so impressed in how productive it is. I'm actually astounding myself. I've got spinach in the middle of summer. Spinach is a winter veg normally, but I've using the local diggers who is down in Dramana, who produce seeds and heirloom seeds and organic seeds and have a huge range. So you go to good suppliers of seeds, and I propagate my own seeds. But I've got spinach which is over 1 foot high. I can't eat it. I'm out there, snip, snip, snip in the smoothie, 2 or 3 leaves. They're that big, they're jumping out of the smoothie tin. Like I'm having to actually sit on it to get it in there. You're right. It's not hard. We just need to stop, think, and sort of as we've been talking over the last couple of weeks, be a being, be within, and just stop and what am I doing? Why am I eating all these vegetables from the supermarket which are in plastic bags? Do I need to do that? That's the question you got to ask yourself. Do I need that? Do I need that? Do I need that? And yes, I'm not going to solve all issues and feed the world, but I think definitely if we can improve the initial nutrition, and get that fresh greens back into our system, organic greens, because the fresh leafy greens need a lot of chemicals on them to obviously combat the pests, caterpillars, snails and whatnot, all the pests, but also to then transport it for you to get a lettuce that's still crispy and good. There's some stuff going in there to try and to get it to that position. I've got strawberries right out the back, 10 meters away. I'm picking them. If I put them in the fridge overnight, they look terrible because they're not. I'm thinking, how are the ones that we get from Queensland, which are trucked down probably 2,000 plus kilometers, looking perky and nice, but mine don't last a day in the fridge? Something's not right there. So that's fine for the blender, but that's absolutely fine. So there's definitely, and that's I've done an aquaponics course. There's a master who's in Queensland, Murray Hallam, and I did his 8-week course. So I've got a proper certificate I'm looking at now in aquaponics design, and he questions what's in food. And he just questions what they've done to food to get it, particularly what they call fresh food, to get it to our and that's just a convenience thing. We're our own fault because we want mangoes all year round. We want avocados all year round. What drives me, but going back to the nutrition, what drives me absolutely bananas is when you get walking around the supermarket and you've got garlic from China, or garlic, I think it's coming from Spain right now. You know how many kilometers that is? That's huge. The food miles on the food. I always think about, I put everything into food miles. How far has that come before it's hit that shelf or hit my trolley? Queensland's far enough as far as I'm concerned, but I'm not buying oranges from South Africa. I'm not buying garlic from China, and garlic can last nearly 6 months in the cupboard. And we grow it in Gippsland. I grow it in aquaponics. They're fantastic. They grow in the clay pebbles. I got great garlic last year. I've actually just planted some last week, and that'll be ready in September, October. It takes a while. But it's all about understanding, where does it come from? 1, what do I need? 2, and what can I grow myself to negate that? And the grow yourself thing, I don't expect everyone to have that answer. Give me a call, speak to your local gardener, your local garden shop, go to Bunnings and see what's on display. That's always in season. That's always right to plant. They're very good like that. But reach out.
Thanks a million, Justin. That's super, super interesting. And I think everyone listening will take away, many things from the talk, but at least 1, 2, 3 things. And I suppose, I can really hear your passion in I think you mentioned, the knowing where things are from. And I remember there was a study done where they went into schools in America, and I'm sure a lot of other countries, and the kids had absolutely no idea the name of some of the fruits and vegetables, but where they came from. And I remember that just really hit me. And because it shows the you know, the illness of our times, in that we're so disconnected to the land, to you know, where things come from, and just disconnected from the land in general. You know, we just have to think of Aboriginal communities and how they knew, as you were just talking about, they knew what fruit and veg grew in what seasons, where to find them, how to cultivate them. You know, so much knowledge is there, and why aren't we learning from our Indigenous people?
We need to go back 100 years. We need to go back to our grandparents, you know, through the war and all, and how they preserve foods. Preserving's fantastic. You know, drying, pickling, whatever it may be. But they got through. They had their seasons. That was ready for the season, and they're doing it in Melbourne now. I follow Vasili's Garden Show, and they're fantastic. And they've got their grandmothers pickling tomatoes and sourcing tomatoes, because that's what they're focusing on, and having a stock for the next 12 months until next season. That's what we got to go back to. Get out of this sort of high expectation of it's going to be available fresh for me down the road when I wheel the trolley around the corner, and have a bit more understanding of what's actually going into your system.
And it tastes so different, you know, as you were saying before. You can tell the taste is so different. You know, there's so many pesticides and stuff on the food that, you know, we've just got no idea about, and you can taste the difference. But I just want to end on, and I'd love to just kind of, something that really inspired me when I saw your setup was the seeds growing, you know, the actual, you know, how it starts, and also your vision and desire to go into schools and teach kids, you know, give them that connection, give them that excitement to actually learn about how seeds grow and what comes from the seed.
Yeah, so like how I started this conversation myself as a child, propagating seeds. It's a fascinating thing watching seeds, you know, come up through the soil, and the next day you look, they're a little bit bigger and they're a little bit bigger, and then in 12 weeks time you've got a full plant which you can consume. Definitely we need to get that back into this. I know they are doing it, and I applaud Woolworths at the moment for they've got those little seed pots now back at the cash registers, which encourages people to go home and plant a seed and see it bloom. And I know Prince Charles was just saying last week that he wants kids to get outside and be with nature, embrace nature, pick up a seed from the bush or a fruit and plant that seed, see if it grows, experiment. That's what life is a bit of an experiment in that respect. And definitely in my systems, I've reached out to many schools and wanting to get aquaponics systems designed and built for those schools, and there's a lot actually happening behind the scenes. So that is a bit of something that is happening. But I think it's now, I'm really concerned with the teenagers plus years. It's easy to do the young ones, but it's the ones that are sort of now leaving home or at home still, and not giving a rat's what's going down their throat, and they're moving out and they're in a unit, and this is a perfect opportunity. I've got a system perfect for unit living, 1 meter by 700 on the deck, on the smallest little patio you can have, and they can grow there and they can be part of this. And I want them to stop and disconnect from the tech for just a minute and just think about what's going on.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure when they see your setup get out there and the word spreads, that they'll be very interested to see kind of how to do that, because I think, you know, all of us deep down want to be connected to the land and want to understand. And, you know, it's so exciting. I mean, we've got our little sprout container here that we bought where we're putting little sprout seeds in. It's tiny. It's just, you know, with and having them, you know, they grow in a day or two. It's incredible.
That's true.
Yeah, and the nutrients in them is equal to like a kilo of green veg, you know, and sprouts. So there's just so much that we can be doing, and, you know, not all of it takes a long time either. It doesn't.
It's just stopping thinking, and it's all there. Everything's at our fingertips. We can do it very easily. We just need to stop and think. And with the beautiful thing about the systems that I've designed, they are bulletproof in a respect. You turn it on and it's self-watering. And that's one of the things about having your own garden, having it as a pot on the windowsill. You're not around for a week, it dies. This will not die. Nothing will die because of water. The only thing I've seen die is because you leave soil on or something like that, or and the possums could get to it. But okay, we have to put nets over and protect it, and that's why I put domes on mine, and I provide that for my clients. So self-watering, I've made it simple, easy, very informative, but you don't need any knowledge at all about growing anything to make this work.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Justin, and thanks for so many gold nuggets for our listeners. I'm sure everyone that listens to this interview will take some great tips away. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Steph. Always a pleasure. Great to see you.